Yeah, so your sun sign represents the core of who you are, and that's based on just your birth date. You don't really need any other information other than that. So that's the easiest thing to get. That's the sign that most people are familiar with.
Okay, and then your moon.
Your moon is your moods and emotions. So for that, that changes every 2.5 days. So usually you don't need a birth time for that. You can pretty much just get that by knowing your birthday and your birth location. But there are instances where if you were born on a day where the moon sign changed on that day, you would have to know what time you were born.
And then your rising.
Yeah, your rising sign is, some people say it's the mass that you wear, but I have heard some controversies around that. So some astrologers don't like it being described that way, because people feel like that kind of diminishes what the rising sign is, because it is a very important sign, since it's the first sign in your chart. But yeah, it's essentially like the way you come off to people. I like to describe it
Mm-hmm.
as the way you come off as like a first impression.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely you're more like surface level personality and how people perceive you. That's your rising sign, and that you definitely need your birth time for, because that changes every 2 hours.
So your rising sign. Alrighty, and I think we are. All right, we're live. Chrissy, thank you for
Awesome.
joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I found you on TikTok. I find a lot of my guests on TikTok, but I was very interested in like your videos and the content you create because you talk about astrology, numerology, spirituality, and I think it's also some tarot on there as well. Um, I don't know a whole lot. I'm more of a like a far removed enthusiast.
Yeah.
So, and by that I mean I listen to I guess what pertains to my chart, my life path number,
Gotcha. Yeah.
and whatever resonates. But excuse me, can you just tell us about yourself, what you do, and just kind of your journey that led up to where you are now?
Yeah. So it's funny. There was a lot of things that kind of drew me to doing this type of content on TikTok, and I actually didn't really plan to do this at all. At the start of this year, I started getting a lot more into spirituality just through meditation to start, and then in doing that, that really helped open up my mind to some of these other aspects of what else is out there besides like our physical world and things like that. Um, but I always was into astrology, so that was kind of my gateway. I definitely was enthusiastic about that. I wouldn't call myself like necessarily an expert by any means, but I definitely do know a lot more than just the basics. So I found myself always obsessing over it and talking about it with all my friends and people like that. And everybody was always like, "You should just start posting content about this stuff because you really like it." And I was like, "Yeah, but like, there's a lot of people out on TikTok that do that. So why should I start?" But then, like I said, I was getting more into spirituality just through my meditations. And then I actually have some friends who do a lot of tarot and oracle readings. And
Mm-hmm.
one of my friends that did one of my oracle readings, she pulled this hummingbird card because it was an animal one. And the hummingbird in the oracle deck that she was playing from represents spirituality, really coming into your own and things like that. And that was kind of what I was going through at the time. And I was like, wow, that really resonated. And the message there and the takeaway was, whatever you're going through right now with spirituality and the journey that you're on, continue on that because that's going to keep serving you. So that was kind of my sign to really delve into it more. And then I had been toying with the idea of potentially doing a psychic reading with somebody for a while, but I was kind of nervous about it because I tend to get really fixated on things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to tread very lightly with that realm. But I was like, you know what? I feel like that was my sign. I'm just going to reach out to this woman who my friend recommended and just see what she has to say. She seems pretty legit, and just see what she has for me. And she actually mentioned with my career, she was like, I see the side hustle coming up for you. She's like, do you know what it is? And I was like, I have no idea. At the time, I wasn't even thinking about starting a TikTok. I was just very much getting into spirituality, but I was learning a lot on my own and just getting into things like the life path numbers and things like that, learning even more about astrology and kind of like all there is that consumes that. But this medium who did my psychic reading, she's the one who really kind of sparked that in me, where I was like, wow, I guess there's more to it than just me being interested in this stuff. And she was like, yeah, and she kept going back to that in the reading. We even moved on from the career portion. And she's like, I really see something with this side hustle of yours. Like, I really think you need to explore this. It seems like it's something creative, could be spiritual. I don't know. So like, once you start seeing yourself doing something like that, just really go for it. And then like a few weeks later, I just had the idea to make a TikTok. I posted my first video, didn't think anything was going to come from it. And then it actually got some traction. And then now I just continue doing it. And it's been really fun.
Awesome. So you posted one video and did you blow up or like what?
I didn't blow up from that one, but it did do a lot better than I thought it was going to do. I just thought it was going to get like a couple hundred views, and it got like a couple thousand.
Okay.
And I wasn't expecting that. And then it kept growing. And then I just kept posting because I was like, okay, awesome. I'll just keep posting. It seems like this content's resonating with people, and I didn't think that it really would because I was new to TikTok at the time.
Yeah.
But the video that actually really did blow up and got me a lot more followers, and it kind of circulated the rest of my videos, was my life path numbers video. That really resonated with people. So that was really exciting to see that was something that resonated, because I didn't think that many people really knew about life path numbers. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was a really cool niche to kind of get into.
Yeah, I feel like numerology is less prevalent than astrology. I feel like everyone knows what astrology is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so just to backtrack, I heard, so you went to this medium, right? Mm-hmm. And she pretty much called out that you were gonna start doing TikTok, right? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and then how long after that meeting with her did you start doing that?
I think it was like a few weeks after, and I think what really sparked it was I'm also really into manifestation. Mm-hmm. And that's in large part to a lot of the astrology TikTokers that I follow, but just in general, it's very big in spirituality. So as I was exploring that, I was learning more about that. Mm-hmm. And I really started taking my manifestations more seriously. I was doing all of like the full moon rituals and new moon rituals and things like that, really following the moon phases. And I felt really connected to that, since it was kind of like marrying the spiritual side that I was getting into, the numerology interest, and then also astrology, which I already had an interest towards. So I guess in doing that, one of my manifestations actually after I met with this psychic medium I was like, I just want more clarity on what I should be doing. And I was like, I am kind of getting this inkling now, after she got me kind of thinking about it, that maybe I should consider creating content, since I always thought that was really cool that people did that. I just never thought I could get into it myself. And then on the 111th day of the year, actually, I forgot what the exact day was, but it was the 111th day of this year. Mm-hmm. I manifested. I was like, you know what? I was like, if I'm meant to create content or do something with this, like I am manifesting that is what I want for myself in the future. And like, if it's meant to happen for me, like I'm very open to whatever the universe has for me. And then I posted my first video the day after. And then that's when that started to get some traction. And I was like, oh, maybe this really is it. So it's kind of all of those things combined.
Okay. That's super interesting. Let's talk more about the moon phases and manifestations. So you said you were following, is it a ritual you said, and you go with the phases of the moon?
Yeah. So like once a month, there's a full moon and there's a new moon. So they kind of happen every 2 weeks, and they rotate. And they all are usually in line with a certain zodiac sign. And then it kind of has a specific message depending on what sign that moon phase is in. So I started getting really into that. And one of my friends actually was really into the moon phases, and she was kind of teaching me a little bit about some rituals you can do to help you manifest. So full moons are a great time to manifest in general. And she kind of taught me about this thing called moon water, which at first I was like, what is that? Because she said it like it was such common knowledge. And I was like, I have no idea what moon water is. So she explained to me that it's when you essentially fill a glass of water and you put it either on your windowsill, or the best way to do it is to put it outside the night of a full moon. And you write down whatever you want to manifest, and you take the piece of paper, you put it underneath this glass of water, and then you leave it there overnight. And then in the morning, you go pick it up before the sun comes up, and then you drink that water that day. And whatever you manifested is meant to come true after doing this ritual.
Does it matter what container the water's in?
Not really. I think obviously the more pure the water, the better. So I usually use like a bottled water and I put it in a glass, and then I put it in a little mason jar and put it out that way. But I don't think it really matters.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I was more thinking along the lines of plastic versus glass, or like metal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I know I did ask about that, but yeah, it doesn't seem like it makes a huge difference. I think it's more so about the intention that you set when you're doing the ritual.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense then.
Yeah.
And then I might have missed it. I'm sorry. There's my room went dim, or maybe my screen did, and I just got distracted a little bit. And maybe
No
you
worries.
did mention it. Did you talk about what you were able to manifest through that? I think you did.
Oh yeah. So I manifested a lot of things, honestly. But in regards to my TikTok, I was manifesting like whatever this side hustle is meant to be for me. I was manifesting that it would happen for me in the near future, because the psychic medium told me that it would happen around this summertime. So I just kind of left it up to the universe from there. But yeah, that is one of the things that I manifested.
Gotcha. Okay. And I know like a lot of this stuff, like I feel like since the pandemics had started, have this feeling and almost this knowing that a lot of people were, quote unquote, woken up, or they had their spiritual awakening, and a lot of people got into astrology, spirituality. People kind of started to go down that rabbit hole, if you will. And I just I want to talk about how valid astrology is, because I feel like there's obviously skeptics, and we don't always have to answer the skeptics and those who don't believe, because I believe if there's certain information out there that's either you're ready for it or you're not ready for it, and if you're not ready for it, you're going to reject it. You know what I mean? But for you, how has astrology come to life for you? Like, what drew you in, and what kind of, like, I guess, not sold you. I don't want to use that. But what got you like on that whole, like, that journey with astrology?
Yeah, that's a good question. Since astrology definitely was the first thing I really got into, and I definitely know a lot more about that than any of the other content that I started posting about. But yeah, with astrology, I think for me, what made it really real for me and made me really want to believe it is when I started learning more about birth charts, and learning that there's a lot more to what makes you from an astrological sense, besides just your sun sign, which is the sign that everybody's more familiar with, just your regular sign based on your birthday. Because I think for a long time, people thought that that's all astrology really was. So I know that a lot of people that I know that are skeptical about it, it's because they're like, oh, well, I don't feel like I'm my sign. I don't feel like I embody those qualities. And people don't really like to feel like they're put into one box, which I understand. So I think that's a big part of why there are so many skeptics, because people, I think, kind of tend to be a little bit black and white about things. And I think people don't realize that there's so much more to astrology than what the average person knows. So for me, once I started delving into that world a little bit more and understanding that it's not just about whatever your sun sign is, there's like your big three, which is like your rising, your moon, and your sun. And then there's also your personal planets, or your innermost planets, which are kind of similar to your big three. Some people call it your little three, and that's like your Venus, your Mars, and your Mercury. And once I started learning about those things, I was like, wow, that actually really tracks with who I am as a person. And I felt very understood after I really read into my chart and learned more about what each of those placements mean. So that's what made it very real for me. And then I kind of went down this rabbit hole where I started looking it up for everybody that I know. I was like, do you want to see what yours is? Like, let's see if it's accurate. And I just like started looking it up for people just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that was such a skeptic, that's what got them believing in it too. I got a lot of people to start thinking that this actually is something that is legitimate when they were like, oh yeah, wow, because I never related to my sun sign, but seeing my moon and my rising, that makes so much sense why I act this way or why I show those characteristics. So I was like, yeah, there's so much that goes into it. So for me, yeah, that's definitely what opened my eyes into really fully believing in astrology.
Yeah, I agree with you because I see my like my birthday's October 23rd.
Huh.
So that before like I delved deep into kind of like the whole natal chart, birth chart and finding
Mm-hmm.
out my big three, I was like on the cusp of Libra. So the very last day of Libra, the
Mm-hmm.
first day is Scorpio.
Right.
And then when I meet people and I tell them, and they ask what sign I am, I always tell them, well, I'm technically a Scorpio, but I feel like I don't have, I don't embody a whole lot of Scorpio, but I do embody like a lot of Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then I started reading more into like, my sun, my moon, and my rising. But my rising is Capricorn. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
and so when I started delving more into that, it started to make more sense, not little. All right, and we're back. Sorry, but we had technical difficulties. So we left off at the you had just got done talking about how astrology, how you first got started with astrology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I was telling you about my chart. What it tell me more about like chart readings. Like, have you done any readings for your friends, and what was their reaction or response to it?
Yeah. I've done very basic level chart readings. I'm still learning how to read the full natal chart because there is just so much that goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've pretty much mastered the most important signs, which, like I mentioned earlier, are like the big three and the little three. So that's how I've started to kind of intro people because it is so much to digest, even just those six signs alone. But since those really make up the core of who you are, I like to start with those when people don't really know too much about astrology. And usually, when people ask me if I can read into what their chart is, they don't really know anything about it. So
Mm-hmm.
that usually tends to give them a lot of insight already. And yeah, the reactions are always, for the most part, like everyone thinks that it's very accurate and they're very shocked to hear that it is.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite part is just seeing the faces of people when they really resonate with that one placement and they're just like they get really silent and it's the same type of reaction every time. They're just like, and I'm like, does that resonate? Because you're being very quiet, and they're like, yeah, I'm just like really scared that
Yeah.
resonated so much. So that's typically the types of reactions I get when I read people's charts.
Okay. See, there's a part of me that wants to go to the place where, because people will say like, well, like you can say that about anybody. You know what I mean?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, is that true?
Meaning like,
Could you like, is it almost like a one size fit all kind of thing, or?
not really. I think that the placements manifest for people differently. And I was actually talking to my friend about it the other day because even for people that have the same placements in something, right? Like if you have the same rising sign as somebody,
Hmm.
those qualities will still shine through for you differently than it might shine through for somebody else. Um, I have a really great example of that actually because I'm a rising Leo and one of my best friends is rising Leo and so is my fiance. But we all act very differently, but we all embody those qualities of the rising Leo. It just comes out in different
Hmm.
ways. Like my one friend, she really embodies that confidence of a rising Leo. So I think a lot of people would think that she actually is a Leo just off the bat because of how confident she comes off.
Hmm.
Um, for some other people it can be more the pride that shines through, so like you show different qualities of that even
Yeah.
if you do have the same placement in that. And I definitely don't think it's a one size fits all. I think the best thing that I've heard is just always take what resonates and leave what doesn't, because every single thing listed in your chart is not going to necessarily embody who you are. um, even though this is kind of a blueprint of what your life is supposed to be based on your personality and where the stars were aligned when you were born, obviously there's other factors that impact who you are, you know, like there's a lot of external factors like who your parents are and what their signs are. I always look to that a lot because they're the ones who raised you and they have a huge impact on how you turn out as well. So it's definitely not a one size fits all.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for explaining that, because I feel like that's a lot of what, pushback you'll get once you start bringing up. I feel like people will, I feel like people just don't understand how intricate it is. And so it is very intricate. Let's talk about the basics. Let's continue along the vein of the basics. What is the sun sign? Like, what is it?
Yeah. So your sun sign represents the core of who you are. And that's based on just your birth date. You don't really need any other information other than that. So that's the easiest thing to get. That's the sign that most people are familiar with.
Okay. And then your moon?
Your moon is your moods and emotions. So for that changes every 2.5 days. So usually you don't need a birth time for that. You can pretty much just get that by knowing your birthday and your birth location. But there are instances where if you were born on a day where the moon sign changed on that day, you would have to know what time you were born.
And then your rising.
Yeah, your rising sign is, some people say it's the mass that you wear, but I have heard some controversies around that. So some astrologers don't like it being described that way because people feel like that kind of diminishes what the rising sign is, because it is a very important sign since it's the first sign in your chart. But yeah, it's essentially like the way you come off to people. I like to describe it as the way you come off as like a first impression. So definitely you're more like surface level personality and how people perceive you. That's your rising sign, and that you definitely need your birth time for, because that changes every 2 hours.
So your rising sign would change every 2 hours?
Yes. Yeah.
Meaning, like, if someone was born at 12, their rising sign would change it would change if they were born at 2.
Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, let me tell you my big three. My sun, my sun and my moon, they're in Libra.
Okay.
And my rising is Capricorn. I think we touched on that earlier. What can you tell me about me based off that?
Yeah. Well, I can start with Libra. I'm actually Libra too, so I definitely know a lot more about this sign. So, like I said, the sun is the core of you are. So I feel like your sun in Libra, it can manifest as, Libras tend to be very charming. They're usually pretty likable. They tend to be very social. A lot of them do have a good amount of friends. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're extroverted, though, because I definitely am a very introverted person, but I feel like I still embody a lot of the traits of a Libra.
Same.
Yeah, exactly. And some other qualities are like being really indecisive. That's something that people love to roast Libras for. So that's definitely one of the traits. And a lot of them tend to be very into love because Venus rules Libra. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're always in a relationship, but a lot of Libras are, or they're talking to somebody, or they're just like interested in someone. Or even if you're somebody who doesn't really like to be in committed relationships, they tend to be dating around a lot too. So just anything involving relationships like that usually tends to be very prevalent in a Libra's life. But like I said, not always, Your moon in Libra, that's interesting. So I actually know a lot of Libra moons, and I think so Libra's an air sign, and air signs tend to be very logical with the way that they process their emotions. They like to kind of talk it out and think it through. It's less about the actual emotion of, because, okay, for example, water moon signs are very emotional. So they're the ones that typically will like be criers, really be very open about how they're feeling, and they don't really hide any of that.
What's an example of a water moon?
Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio. Although Scorpio is a little bit different because they're a little more aggressive, but Pisces and Cancer are really good examples of that. Like they really feel their emotions. They're very strong. They really show you, like, when they're upset, even if it does come off as passive aggressive, but it is shown, I think with air moons, they tend to be a little bit more reserved with their feelings, but if they are willing to talk about it, you definitely want to talk it out.
Hmm.
Um, and then your rising was Capricorn, you said? Yeah, so Capricorns are an earth sign. So they all earth signs tend to be very grounded in the way that
Hmm.
they act. So they're not typically the types that come off very like energetic or um, outgoing in that sense. Just very cool, calm, and collected, which I definitely see from you. So it doesn't shock me that you're a rising Capricorn.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Um, and Capricorns are also very driven and ambitious, so that can also sometimes come out in a rising sign. So it makes sense why like you're going for what you're going for with your podcast and really the way you take it seriously and things like that. That's very Capricorn ambition. So I definitely see a lot of those traits in you, which makes sense because we just met. So that's what I'm seeing
Yeah,
more so come out.
that's what I was just gonna say that like for whoever is listening or watching, like we literally don't know each other, but I agree with everything you just said. Like that's literally you described me to a pretty much to a T. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. Which is why I'm so drawn to astrology because the how scary accurate it could be. You know what I mean? It is very
Hmm.
scary accurate. Um, but astrology. How long has astrology been around? Do you know? Because I feel
Oh my
like
gosh, for a very long time.
long time, right? That's what they kind of did. Like, what did witches practice that back then, or is that what they called witches? Like people who practice astrology. Do you know that?
I'm actually not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think I might be off on that. We'd have to do more research on that. But yeah, it's so interesting how accurate it could be. I mean, I wish I knew like some of my friends' birth times and stuff. That way, maybe you could expand on it a little. But
Mm.
what about for celebrities? Like, is there any celebrity that you may know their birth, like their big three, and you're like, oh, that kind of checks.
Yeah, yeah. I look up celebrity birth charts all the time. I get
Uh-huh.
very curious about that. And most celebrities' birth charts, especially if they're like A-listers, you can find their birth charts online. Um, but I recently was looking up Olivia Rodrigo's chart since she's really blowing up right now,
Hmm.
and I know she's a Pisces because she talks about it all the time. And it makes sense because Pisces are a water sign, as I mentioned earlier. So they're very emotional. They're also really creative. So it doesn't shock me that she is a songwriter first and foremost, even more so
Hmm.
than a singer. So it makes sense that she loves to be creative in her writing style. And then the fact that her songs are just very emotional songs, they're definitely
Hmm.
songs that people love to cry to. That's very Pisces because they really feel all their emotions.
Yeah.
So that was, I was like, that absolutely tracks. And then I saw her big three was, I think, her moon, her moon. I forgot exactly what it was, but she has
Hmm.
Libra in her chart somewhere. I don't know if it's her rising or her moon. And it made a lot of sense because Libras, like I said, are usually pretty likable. They have that charm to them. And everybody that talks about Olivia Rodrigo that knows her, like even other celebrities who just met her, they're like, she's the sweetest person. She's super nice. She's like very personable and social. The type of person who's not afraid to go up to somebody like Megan the Stallion, even though she just started in her own career, and not being afraid to introduce herself. So I was like, that's very Libra of her. So
Mm.
yeah, I love to look up those celebrity charts, and it just always makes sense. It always makes sense.
Yeah, it's mind blowing how accurate um, astrology could be to describing somebody. Yeah, it's super super interesting. Let's shift over. I saw on your TikTok you were talking about everything everywhere all at once.
Mm-hmm.
I watched that movie. I need to go watch it again because I fell asleep. But it was very not that it was boring. It was it was it's a really trippy movie.
Mm-hmm.
For those who haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it too much, but I think I can say this. It's kind of about the multiverse, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's as much as I could say. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, I know it's kind of getting some traction on social media right now. What do you think about it?
Yeah. I love that movie. I think everybody should see it just because it really does open your eyes up to the spiritual realm a little bit. And like you said, the multiverse, because that's definitely what it focuses on. And I'm not gonna lie, there was a point where I wasn't so sure if the multiverse really existed. I it took a little bit because I was like, come on, like how can you? I used to be very much like, if you can't prove it, I don't think it exists. So it is kind of funny just
Mm.
where I stand on things now. But yeah, I think that that movie did a really good job at showing what that concept really is in a way that was digestible and entertaining. And for somebody who knows nothing about that world and what that all entails, I think it's still easy to follow. And I like that it had a good mix of things. Like it was emotional 1 second, but then it also made you laugh. And then it was serious. Like it really touched on everything. So I think it really keeps you engaged in that way. But yeah, again, like I don't want to spoil too much about the movie, but that's more or less what it is. And I do really feel like that whole concept of the multiverse is it's real. I mean, I've seen a lot of things on TikTok, especially recently, of like glitches happening for people. I don't know if you've seen those, but it's
Glitches?
thing glitches. Yeah. So I was like, what's a glitch? So for example, there's this one viral video of this girl who posted a security cam footage of her working at her job. She works in the food industry, and she cut up a
Mm.
lemon, and then she walked away to go get a bag to put it in. And then when she picked up the lemon, it wasn't
Mm.
cut anymore.
That's wild.
And you can, yeah, and you can see on the camera footage that like it did kind of slightly like move a little bit, but like there's no cuts in the camera, whatever. And she seemed pretty spooked herself. So I mean, I again, there's always skeptics, right? You could always argue like, oh, it's edited or whatever. But if you allow yourself to believe this idea that maybe that is real and that really happened, right? That is a perfect example of the multiverse in play, because sometimes we're in moments where the realities are kind of shifting and they can kind of cross over sometimes. And
Mm.
I think that that's what happened to her in that moment. So it's really bizarre.
Yeah, it's funny because we were the last conversation I had right before yours. I was talking to his name is Derek, and we were kind of talking about the multiverse in a way. But you just saying that right now just kind of sparked this thought in me is um, like, what if the multiverse is they're just different timelines? You know what I mean? Like they're so the multiverse, for those who don't know, and I'm gonna do my best and feel free to chime in, but the multiverse is like pretty much different timelines of just different worlds. You know, if there's a say we're like I'm Matthew from Earth One, you're Chrissy from Earth One, and then Earth Two Matthew is like Earth Two Matthew, which I would have loved is Drake,
Yeah.
and then Earth Two Chrissy is Olivia Rodrigo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so basically, that's what the multiverse is: different possibilities of who you are and who you could be. I don't know. Would you say that's kind of it?
Yeah, pretty much. Just like
Yeah.
alternate realities, basically.
There you go.
There's different
That's
versions of the way that your life could even go. Like, there's a version, we're in this reality right now where we're talking here on Skype, but maybe there's a reality where we never met, you know?
yeah.
And that's a huge possibility, and like different ways that your life can go, which the movie really talks about. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it made me think about this. Like, what if, like, because you said glitches, right? What if, like, to hop to a different timeline, it just takes a different mindset change? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
what if that's how you hop timelines? Is like you just change your mind to think a different way.
That could be it. I mean, I'm sure if you really were able to lose yourself in that, especially if you're in like a deep meditation, I think it's possible. Like honestly, there's times where the more I get more advanced with meditating, I feel like I'm really traveling, which is
Yeah.
when you kind of feel like you're somewhere else in like a different world. And I feel like
Yeah.
that might be a way to hop those timelines, like you said. I absolutely believe that's a way to activate it.
Have you seen the movie? Gosh, what's it called? It's a pic not Pixar. It's I think it's DreamWorks. It's with gosh, it's a really good movie too. But it kind of talks about like spirituality and astral projecting. I feel like you've seen it. Something in me is, or at least you heard about it.
Yeah, I know. It sounds familiar. I can't pinpoint the title.
Oh gosh, what is it called? Universe. What is it called? It's called. Um, I'm a.
Can you describe it more? Like what else
It's just
happens in the
basically this
movie?
dude. I'm a spoiler alert for people who haven't seen it, but he like falls into a manhole. He's like a jazz musician.
Soul.
There you go. Yes, yes.
Soul.
Have you
Yeah, I
seen
have
it?
seen it. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
It's when I saw that movie, it just kind of made sense. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
have you ever seen something like you just feel like, oh yeah, that's true. Like that's how it works. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, absolutely.
Did you
Yeah.
feel that way too?
Yes, definitely. And I
That's
think that entertainment does a really good job at depicting these concepts, right? Because they do it in a way where it's a little bit more lighthearted. Because I think sometimes these concepts can be so difficult to grasp. It just sounds
right.
so otherworldly. People are like, there's just no way. And that's confusing. So people kind of write it off
Yeah.
before really like trying to understand it. So I think that a movie like Soul, a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once, those are all great resources to kind of dip your toes into that world.
Yeah. The thing about Soul though, I feel like it was obviously it was an animated movie,
Yeah.
so the audience was for kids, right? And so with that being said, I felt like it was still like a very very deep movie. You know what I mean? Like the just the way like they kind of there's no way a kid could understand that. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And so like I just find it super interesting how they made a movie like that, and it was like what made you want to make a movie like that. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
but there was a scene where he I think his name is Joe, and he walks. You know, he falls into the manhole, and you kind of see it's almost like yeah, his soul was leaving his body, where it was
Mm-hmm.
like everything was kind of like grayscale, black and white, and you just kind of saw his body like falling. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember when I was living in the Bay Area last year, and I attempted to, I think I attempted to astral project. I've only attempted once
Mm.
because it takes a lot of manpower or mind
Yeah.
power.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, I'm not even saying I was super successful at it, but I did feel like my body was, my soul or my spirit was leaving my body, and I did kind of experience that like that almost grayscale, black and white. It was a very trippy experience. And I say all that to ask you, have you astral projected or like have you had any attempts? Like, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I've definitely tried. It's a little bit difficult to master. I find that it's easier during times that are very sensitive to things like that. So, kind of like those full moons I was talking about
Mm,
earlier. That's when I definitely feel more in touch with my intuition. And I feel like I'm in touch with my higher self and things like that. Um, so I think that that's when I have a stronger ability to really go there because those are the times where I'm like, I don't know where I just was, and I don't even feel like I'm in my own body.
yeah.
So I think that's the closest I've gotten to astral projecting. I don't really necessarily know where I went, and I think that's what's so interesting about it too, because sometimes you actually don't remember. It's kind of similar to like when you dream, right? There's some dreams that you don't remember, and there's some that are so vivid that you don't forget it. Um, and I think that that's also another way to astral travel too. I think a lot of people do that in their dreams. And I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of times with dreams, people say that you're potentially traveling to another reality.
It
So,
definitely feels that way. Um, like, even the past 2 years, you know, I can't recall every single dream that I've had, but every single dream has been a. It's almost like I'm picking up it's almost like everything everywhere all at once. I'm like literally going to another like universe, and I'm picking up where I left off there, and
hmm
it's a very surreal, like I don't know, people might not even believe what I'm saying right now, but it's like it's a very trippy experience where like lately my dreams have been like that where I'm literally like it doesn't feel like a regular dream. I don't know how to explain it. I can't obviously I can't explain it, but
yeah,
um,
I think you're talking about vivid dreams because yeah, some people have those, and I definitely have those as well, where it feels so real. So that's the difference between like a vivid dream versus just your regular dream that's very much like a fantasy, and like you know
Yeah.
you pretty much know in the dream it's not actually your reality, but when it feels real, that is more of a vivid dream.
Yeah, it's a super interesting experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's talk more about numerology.
Yeah.
So I'm a life path 3.
Oh, me too.
You are?
Yeah.
That makes sense for both of us. Because you're
Yeah.
on TikTok, I'm doing
Yep.
this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What is a life path 3?
Yeah. Life Path 3 is definitely big on creativity and communication. So they usually say that people who have Life Path 3 will do things like you said, like what we're doing, like speaking to a mass audience, really big with public speaking. It's, people that do those TED Talks too, that's definitely, they probably have Life Path 3, or like a good amount of them probably do. I would not be shocked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely big on communication. But I will note with these life paths too, because I got a lot of comments on my life path video that was like, "That's the complete opposite of me," and I would let them know that sometimes if it doesn't sound like who you are right now, a lot of times it could be what you should be working towards to come into your full potential.
Mm.
So I do like to note that as well, because again, there's always skeptics, right? And I think that's always my response to that, because I think people are going to think, oh, it's a one size fits all, and it's not. Nothing is. So
Mm-hmm.
I will note that with a life path, because some people that also had life path 3, they're like, no, I don't like to talk. I'm not a good communicator. I'm really awkward, all this stuff. And I'm like, that's something that I think you might need to work on then, so then you can really reach your full potential. So that's a good thing to note about those.
Yeah, or it could just like you haven't gotten to that point where you're
Yeah.
stepping into that role of a life path 3. There's some
Right.
other things
Yeah.
that need to take place, you know, for that to happen. Like I feel like
Hmm.
other people with other life path numbers need to influence your life in the way they were designed to. That way, they can lead you to become that life path
Yeah, definitely.
to fit the description of of the life path that you really are.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Tell me more about. Um, so you do a lot of astrology. You talked a little bit about numerology,
Hmm.
um, and you might have mentioned this earlier. Were you always into spirituality, or did astrology come first? I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, but I feel like you could start with either or first.
Yeah, I wasn't into spirituality at first,
Mm-hmm.
actually. That's something that I really got into this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought I would, because I had this stigma about spirituality, which I think is what a lot of people perceive it like as well, where I thought it was very much like just all the witchcraft stuff. And um, I don't know. It just didn't seem like something that I would really be into. I also wasn't really into meditation before. So I just viewed it as people that were like that, like very like kind of like how, like the stereotype of like, oh, somebody who's like very one with the earth, like kind of a hippie. Like that's
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
thought people who were into spirituality, I thought that that's what it entailed. And like people being like, oh, I worship like the moon and the earth and all this. Like, it just sounded so hippy dippy to me. And I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't, I was so not into that. Um, I definitely was much more of like a realist, so to speak, or whatever the modern definition of that is, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I definitely was skeptical about that stuff. So no, I wasn't into spirituality at all before. Astrology definitely came first. I don't know why that one felt easier to grasp. I think because it's specifically directed towards me, since everybody has a birth chart. And then even with numerology, I was more inclined to believe that too, because it's based on your birthday. So I was like, of course, this makes sense. It only makes sense that the day you were born could have a meaning, right? I think spirituality was just such a larger than life concept for me to grasp. And I
Mm.
think for me too, like um, I grew up Catholic. And so for me, that was my initial intro, I guess, into spirituality. Like that's what I learned about growing up. And for me, that was something that I didn't resonate with as much, just mainly because it was so structured. And I'm a very unstructured person in that way with what I believe. I like to kind of customize what I want to believe and pick and choose what resonates with me, like kind of going off your intuition, which before I even knew it was my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I didn't really follow organized religion as much. But then um, I got more into spirituality. I felt more drawn to that because it seemed like something that's um, more personal and more about you and the relationship that you're having with the universe or whichever higher power that you believe in. Because at the end of the day, I think I don't want to be disrespectful towards like any beliefs, right? But I think that at the end of the day, a higher power is a higher power, and
Mm-hmm.
whichever one you choose to believe in or pray to or do your rituals to, right? Like the point of the matter is, I really believe that there is a higher power out there, and so spirituality was just kind of a less structured way to kind of believe into those things, and that's why I got really into it. So yeah, I definitely kind of converted, I guess, and became more of a believer in all of that world and started noticing that it doesn't have to be what you perceive it to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think organized religion, and yeah, like you said, we're not trying to, um, we're not trying to say organized religion is a bad thing, or it's
Mm-hmm.
us versus them. I think
No, not at all.
I think organized religion is, they all do the same thing. We're all trying to, do the same thing. We all want the same thing. You know what I mean? We all want to experience love. We all want to experience joy and peace and, the beauty of life. And I think that's what all organized religions, kind of point to and lead to. And I think for anyone who's listening, you can definitely find something that works for you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, kind of like what you said, whatever resonates, you know what I mean? I tend to believe that every religion kind of has a little bit of the truth in each of them. And so, yeah, I mean, spirituality for me, it's more of just being kind of realizing that everything is connected, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
that we are the universe, you know what I mean? And that, and we are kind of God, you know what I mean? Like we're God in a way.
Yeah.
And so because God, universe and source to me, they're all, you know, the same thing to me. And so um, when it comes to spirituality and, with that being said that we're all connected, do um, you obviously resonate with that, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
What was your realization? And before you say your answer, this is my explanation for it. And this was something that no one really told me anything. Like this is something I kind of came to my own conclusion on. But it happened when I was working at Starbucks. I still work at Starbucks, but when I was at Starbucks, and I had realized that a lot of people come to Starbucks. Like anybody and everybody goes to Starbucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my realization was, if I don't do my job right, right, if I fuck up on a drink or I give a customer, an attitude or whatever, you know what I mean? And it kind
Mm-hmm.
of but it sets off this ripple effect that they carry to wherever they're going. And then that sets off a ripple effect. And then it comes back to you some way, you know what I mean? So that's kind of what made me realize, like, oh, we really are connected. And so we really have to be mindful of our decisions, what we say, and be very conscious of how we interact with people, you know what I mean? And so that's
Yeah.
what made me realize, like, oh, we're really connected. Um, and that's how I had that. That's what kind of sent me on like the spirituality path and wanted to know
Mm.
more about, you know, learn more about the mysteries of the universe. Um, but I'm curious to know your experience. Like, what makes you believe, or what makes you kind of lean towards believing that we're all connected?
Yeah. For me, I think the seed that was really ingrained in me and planted is I've always been the kind of person that wants to help people. So I think I always was kind of drawn to things like that. But um, my like full-time job, I don't do anything like that. I have like a 9 to 5. So I was like, okay, well that's not how I'm going to do that. And I try to donate here and there, but I wouldn't say I'm like the kind of person who's always like volunteering and doing things like that. But I felt like inclined to help people in some way. And the one way in my life that I feel like I've been able to help people is kind of giving people advice or even just listening to people, right? And that is something as simple as giving a friend advice or just listening to them when they're in need, or even a stranger. I noticed that throughout my whole life, there's always been people who feel kind of drawn to me and would always want to just talk to me, even if we just met. Like this happens to me all the time, even still.
Same.
Yes, there's certain people that are like that, who are the people just feel really drawn to you.
It's the Libra
And
in us.
I mean, hey, that might be it, right? But yeah, like there are people like that where people really feel comfortable with you and they just sense this aura about you. So going back to connection, kind of like how you mentioned with your job at Starbucks, I think in having those interactions with people, that is what really started to make me realize, like, wow, like similar to you, like we're really all connected, and everybody that you meet for a reason. And I always had this belief. I always believed in that saying, like everything happens for a reason. I never look at anything, even the setbacks in life, as anything that, oh, like if I could do it again, I would do it a different way. I always think that things happen exactly with the way that they're supposed to. So even something as minuscule as a passing conversation you have with a stranger, I think that you were meant to meet that stranger for a reason. And so I noticed that when people would do this and they would talk to me about these things, and that it seemed to really help them just to have somebody listen, even if I'm just a stranger, I was like, wow, you really make an impact on people. Like we all do, every single person that you meet impacts your life, whether it's positive or negative. So that kind of was opening my eyes to things like that. And then the way that connected really into me getting into spirituality and going down that rabbit hole is kind of around the time that I was reflecting on this, and I was doing more meditation and also like going to therapy too. So I was like healing a lot of like my past traumas and things like that. It really just was opening my mind to a lot of things, and I was starting to connect all the dots. And one late night I was on TikTok, and I was just kind of searching things about spirituality and TikTok, since I had started to see some of that come up on my For You page. And there was this one video that was talking about signs that you might be a spiritual healer. And I was like, oh, what's that? And it mentioned the thing about people, like strangers coming up to you and like feeling like drawn to you, even if like you didn't say anything, like nothing, you didn't ask for this at all, but they just feel comfortable with you in that way. And I knew that that wasn't something that everybody goes through, because I would tell my friends, I'm like, does this ever happen to you? And they're like, no. So when I saw that TikTok video and it listed all these little signs that you might be this spiritual healer, I was like, oh my God, I really feel like that's me. And then I kind of looked into that, and then that really resonated with me. And I was like, I just had a moment, and I like had chills, and I really was like, wow, I really think that this is real. Like, there is something to this. And it's really like a connection that your soul has to this larger universe and the higher power and things like that. And that was the first time I really felt that connection. And then shortly after, I went through my spiritual awakening, and I was like feeling all the things that come with that. But yeah, that's kind of how it all jump started.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because unlike you, I didn't tell anybody about how I resonate with being a spiritual healer, because I'm still learning to, and I'm still almost I'm more I don't say I'm skeptical, but I'm open. You know what I mean? I'm very open to learning more about it and exploring it more. It obviously interests me. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Like hearing you say that just kind of gave me just affirmed that I think I'm on the right path, and I feel like you are as well. And so it's very, very interesting that you bring that up. How do you feel like let me ask you this. Do you feel like your purpose is to heal then?
In a way, but I think, I use the term healer lightly, right? Because I don't want people to think I'm like gonna start doing Reiki and like all that stuff
Yes,
with the
yes.
chakras. I mean, that's great. There's people that do that. I don't think that's my path personally. Um, but yeah, in looking into what spiritual healers really are, I did see that it could be anything. It's because being a healer really is just being able to impact other people and help them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which I think to some extent, like everyone is capable of doing that. I think we all are able to heal everyone in our lives. Like the role that you play in a life, I think you always really matter to somebody and you really make an impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we get into like the technicalities of what the spiritual healers are, I was looking into it and it was saying that it could be the way that it manifests could be in any way. It could be the more traditional kinds where you're doing the actual spiritual healing and using the chakras and all of that and really into that um, side of things. But then it also could be things like having a podcast or having a TikTok and using your voice to kind of spread your beliefs and hoping that it resonates with somebody. And so for me, like that's how I think I'm following my path of being a healer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is by kind of spreading those messages and sharing it. Coming onto this podcast with you and like talking about these things, and whoever listens to it, I just hope it resonates and maybe they learn something from it. And I think that that's always to be a spiritual healer too.
Absolutely, I agree with that. It's funny because not I think, but I do have this feeling that both spirituality, astrology, and numerology, they all work together to kind of, I mean, they're all meant to kind of tell you who you are and describe you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so using all three of them to kind of discover more about yourself, which is why I, wanted to kind of explore them. But using all of them, you being a life path 3 and me being a life path 3 and us being, quote unquote spiritual healers,
Mm-hmm.
it's very fitting that we're kind of doing what we do, right? And kind of
Yeah.
like you said, like you can heal people through your TikToks. I believe
Mm-hmm.
that, because someone could come across your video and you could be talking about how, you know, let's do astrology for example. They find out their big 3 and they're like, oh my gosh, like that really resonates with me, and that really kind of it kind of sets them on a path to begin healing or begin
Mm-hmm.
their spiritual journey. And so, and I do believe that about myself too. Like the more and more I kind of like um, research, not even research, but just kind of like exploring spirituality, astrology, and numerology, the more I continue to explore those fields, the more I feel like, yeah, this podcast is going to bring healing to people. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, but even on everyday interactions, when we're out and about, I feel like the fact that people are drawn, and not in a very selfish way. The fact that people are drawn to us, I think those are big shoes to fill. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to. Because I'm not gonna lie, it's cool that people come to me. You know what I mean? And they
Yeah.
feel like they can tell us or tell me and tell us, their life stories. You know what I mean? It's cool
Yeah.
that that can happen, but it's also super exhausting. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
and it's like, dang, like, and sometimes I feel like I don't have the capacity sometimes, because I'm just like
Mm-hmm.
burnt out of just like, okay, because when people are talking to you, you're absorbing that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And people may hear that and they're like, what do you mean by that? But like, no, you're absorbing their energy, you're absorbing the emotions that they're kind of exuding when they're talking to you. And so it's very fulfilling work, but at the same time, it can be exhausting and it is tiring. You know what I mean?
No, it definitely is. And I think that's why usually they advise people who do maybe think that they're a spiritual healer to not pursue that path if you feel like it's going to take too much out of you, because it is a very big responsibility, like you said. And it is very draining. I mean, like at the end of the day, even if we have this higher purpose, right? We're still human beings at the end of the day. We still
Mm-hmm.
are in our physical body. This is the form that we're in currently. And we can't push ourselves too hard because we have our own lives to worry about too. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why they actually do suggest, if you do want to go down that route, first and foremost, heal yourself first. You can't heal other people if you haven't healed first yourself. So there's actually a lot of people out there who are still kind of working on their healing journey. And so they don't even know that they're really healers yet because they haven't gone to that point. It's not to say that they won't when they do heal, but that's usually the very first step. You absolutely cannot heal other people if you haven't healed yourself. But even once you have, you still will experience that burnout and feeling really drained. And especially because healers are empaths, meaning that like you really feel everybody else's emotions as your own, you really take it in. I definitely feel like even with my own friends, sometimes I'm like, I can only take so much of you venting about something. It's not that I don't want to be there for you, but I need to take a second sometimes to recharge myself. So I find that happening to me a lot. And actually, when I was talking to the psychic medium, she said that too. She was like, yeah, she's like, you're definitely an empath. And I can see that you take in a lot of people's energies and you don't really get to recharge yourself enough. So then she suggested to me, make sure to really smudge or sage, which is when you burn the sage stick and kind of cleanse that way. She suggested doing that, meditating, doing self-care to really just cleanse your mind and your body and your soul so that you can feel replenished to be able to take in that energy again. But that's even a lot of work, right? To continuously cleanse yourself and do that, you would almost have to do that on a daily basis. And there's people who
Right.
do. I do it like once a week, but if I was actually doing the healing work on a regular basis and really meeting one-on-one with people, I think I would definitely need to do that like every day. And even then it would still be a lot.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. If you're in that line of work where you're, you know, a spiritual healer, I definitely can see somebody really dedicating their time to really making sure, their energy is aligned and their chakras are aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's harp on, for those listening who may be empaths or maybe feel like they too are ones that people can go to for whatever when it comes to sharing, holding space for people. I think that's what
Mm-hmm.
the best way I can describe what healers are. We hold space for people.
Yeah.
um, let's talk about how you can create boundaries, so that you're not always burnt out from absorbing other people's energy. Do you create boundaries, or how do you create boundaries?
Yeah. No, I struggled with it for a little bit actually. And I think it is in large part because I am a Libra, because Libras also tend to be people pleasers. And it's just because we just always want to be there for people and make people happy. But sometimes, a lot of the time, you end up sacrificing your needs as a result of that. So I definitely had a hard time setting boundaries at first. I would give way too much of myself to people just because I genuinely care. It's not even like I feel like I have to. I genuinely just enjoy helping people, but then I really forget about myself sometimes. So I think, yeah, with setting those boundaries, I think what it comes down to is learning to put yourself first and knowing that you're not being selfish by doing that. It's kind of cliche, but it's like that saying where they say you have to fill up your own cup first before you can fill up somebody else's. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I also feel the need to say this too. Like, if you have people in your life and you feel like they're distant, or maybe they feel like, yeah, just distant, I think it's just, you have to understand some people are taking time to heal and get to know
Mm-hmm.
themselves, get to know themselves better, you know what I mean? And so that they can come and spend time with you from a full cup, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and so it's hard when you're empty and you're kind of around people who kind of expect you to kind of be full of life when you can't.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard, you know what I mean? And it's just like, you just, I don't know if you are the same way, but I really enjoy my space and my alone time, because that's
Mm-hmm. Me
how
too.
I recharge. You know what I mean? I
Same
work at
here.
Starbucks still, and so at the
Oh
end of
yeah,
the
that's a
day,
lot of energy to be taking in on a daily basis.
absolutely, and so it's very challenging to kind of like to make sure I'm on top of my game, if you will. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so I'm sure you feel the same way. Um,
absolutely.
but as we wrap up here, there's like three questions, maybe two, that I want to ask you, and it's pretty much how I bookend every single podcast. Um, the first question would be, what's the what's one of the biggest lessons that you learned this year,
Ooh, good
past two
question.
years? Actually,
Yeah,
COVID. Let's just start with
yeah,
COVID. Since COVID
right.
started.
Yeah. Ooh, man, what a loaded question. I would say the biggest thing I've learned is kind of what I just said. I mean, like setting those boundaries and putting yourself first and knowing that that's okay, you know? Really learn to prioritize yourself. Be be nice to yourself first, you know? That kind of also just goes along with like, self-love and self-compassion and all those things. So I think a lot of people don't have enough of that. I think a lot of people are very willing to give that to other people, but it's a lot harder to give that to yourself. And so that is definitely the biggest thing I've learned and reflected on the past 2 years, and all that comes with that, like setting boundaries, self care, putting yourself first, making sure that you're good first before you tend to anybody else. And that has been extremely life changing. Um, and I will also note, like, the other thing that I think has been a big lesson is mindfulness, like really being in the present moment. I think that's been huge for me, especially because I'm definitely a planner. I like to be very organized and I'm always looking ahead. I'm also like very ambitious and driven. So I'm always trying to think, okay, what's next? What's the next step? How can I start working towards my next goal or the next thing I want to do? And I think just like, the pandemic really taught a lot of us to slow down. And I think that, of course, there was a lot of tragedy with it, but I think, with every tragedy, there's also a silver lining to it. And I think the silver lining was that it forced a lot of us to slow down. So I think mindfulness, being present, just appreciating the small things in life, being grateful, expressing gratitude for what you have, even in the darkest of times, I think all of those things are things that I really learned and reflected on these past 2 years.
I love that. I appreciate that response because I agree with it, yeah, all of it. And you can't, going back to what we said earlier, you can't lead from an empty cup. You got to make sure you are prioritizing, your mental well-being. And so, that's where life starts. Life starts in your mind, and so
Mm-hmm.
you got to make sure you prioritize, the well-being of your mental health, and taking time to unplug, like you said, just to slow down, you know what I mean? Just to slow down, take a breather, take a walk in nature, which, that's, I
Yeah,
think, one of the best ways to recharge. But yeah,
definitely.
I love that response. Um, and then the second question would be, what to you is success? Like, what does success mean to Chrissy?
These are really good wrap up questions. Commend you for that.
Thank you.
So that's a great question, mainly because for me, I think I had a very toxic relationship with the word success. I think,
Mm.
like I mentioned, I'm a very ambitious and driven person. So as a result of that, I tend to be kind of a perfectionist. And for a while, I used to think that being successful was accomplishing your goals but almost in the most perfect, unrealistic way. And so what I would find is that I would go for all these things and achieve my goals, thinking, yeah, once I achieve that, I'll feel successful. And I never did. I never felt that way because I just wanted the next thing. It's like I could never just be happy with whatever I achieved. I just always wanted more. Um, so I think now the way I've learned to define success is just feeling fulfilled. I think fulfillment and feeling abundance in your life, I think that is what success is. Um, I think once you finally reach a point where you feel like what you're doing in your life is meaningful to you and you feel good doing it and you wake up and you're excited that that's what you get to do with your life, I think that that's success. I don't think it has to be connected to a material thing or something super tangible. It could be a feeling. And I think that that's what I've started associating success more with the way I feel rather than like a specific thing I've achieved.
Love it. And then one final question. What is the purpose or meaning to life, if you think there is one?
Hmm. Whew. I think that the meaning of life is to find your purpose. And I I will say that's definitely something I learned more recently, and I started looking at that way more recently, especially this year when I got really into spirituality and all of that stuff. But yeah, I think it is about finding your purpose. I think there's a lot of people, most people actually, that never really find what that higher purpose is. And you hear about it all the time. People talk about it in the media, all of that. Um, and it sounds kind of corny after a while. I was like, yeah, okay, higher purpose, like, but I got to pay the bills, right? And I think people get so
Mm-hmm.
caught up in the day to day, which is valid, of course. You do have to take care of those things because that's your livelihood, right? But I think it is important to really, in this lifetime, find whatever your purpose is so that you can really make the most of the life that you have, right? You only have this one life in this physical body that you're living. Um, I think that our souls definitely get to have other lives and things like that, because I definitely believe in like reincarnation and stuff like that. But the life that you're living currently, this is the only chance you're going to get to live that life. So it's kind of like thinking about, how do you want to leave this world? And when you look back at your whole life, whenever it is your inevitable time to go, it's like, what are you going to have to say about your life? Do you want to just feel like you kind of went by and you're like, yeah, I did everything right and I did all the steps, I got a job, I did this and whatever, right? Or do you want to feel like you really found what your purpose is and you feel really fulfilled? And that goes back to that feeling of being really fulfilled. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that is what the purpose of life is meant to be.
Beautifully put. The purpose of life is to find your purpose, which is one thing that I believe, like you said, everyone should venture on and try to find is your purpose. That's one thing like I'm passionate about. If you have a gift to sing, you need to
Mm-hmm.
freaking sing because you have that gift
Yeah.
for a reason. You know what I mean? If you have a gift to cook, use that gift to cook because it's gonna bring so much life to other people. If you have a
Yes.
gift to speak, use that gift because without it, there's people who you may not ever meet, but they need your gift. You know what I mean? For yourself,
Mm-hmm.
there's people who need your astrology readings, your astrology knowledge. There's people who need that, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you responded that way because that's one of the big things that I will. That's the hill I will die on. You know what I mean? It's like find your
Mm-hmm.
purpose because if you don't, I sincerely believe that you're gonna live a very very unhappy life
I
because
agree.
it would suck to die. And you know who David Goggins is?
No, I don't.
Okay, he pretty much, long story short, he was a Navy SEAL, and he's a he's kind of a life not a life coach, but he's more of like a motivational speaker. But he has an incredible story. I encourage you to look him up. But he talks about this in his book where he says he had this vision that because he was a super overweight guy, like he was like over like 300 pounds, right? And he just had a very very difficult life, and he ended up going to the Navy SEALs, and he's very all about that mindset of just working hard and like you know living your full potential. And so
Mm-hmm.
David Goggins in his book Can't Hurt Me talks about how he was able to have this vision, and his vision was him like he said and this is kind of paraphrasing, but he said imagine he had imagined like if he died and he got to meet God, and God was like, David Goggins, Navy SEAL, and just starts listing all the accomplishments, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then he was saying, had he not taken that route of, becoming a Navy SEAL or whatever, and sticking to his day job, um, and, he dies and he meets God and he's listing off who David Goggins was, and he was like, you know, imagine dying and getting to that point where you meet God and you're like, and God is like reading off, or universe of source, reading off who you could have been. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why I believe, you have to find your purpose, because imagine you, dying and you meet the person who you're supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That would suck. You know what I mean? That would really suck, because with that
Yeah.
comes with all the experiences of being the person you could have been, instead of, living just a kind of a hard life. Life is hard, but it doesn't have to be extremely, extremely hard. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, totally agree. I'll definitely look the guy up. That sounds, yeah, that's a great story, even from what you
Yeah.
summarized.
If you're into audiobooks, I recommend the audiobook. It's called
Ooh, okay.
Can't Hurt Me. Probably one of the best books that I have ever. I mean, it's more of a podcast, but the audiobook, I think it's a lot better than the actual physical book, because you get to hear his commentary, and it's very,
Um,
very, very interesting. But Chrissy, thank you so much for the conversation. I am going to do an official closing to the podcast, but if you could just stay on the line so we can just kind of just touch bases afterwards. But
yeah.
Chrissy, tell people what you're working on and where they can find you.
Yeah. So I'm just still working on some content to post about like astrology, more numerology content, starting to do some tarot readings, angel numbers, all things spirituality. And you can find me on TikTok at datu.intuition.
And I'll have all that in the description. But yeah, thank you so much again. And
Thank you.
yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise.
Awesome. And cut.